Speaking. I'm your host, Michael Dwyer, and perhaps for the first time in my long history with Historically Speaking, we are filming at Rutland's Paramount Theatre. And this is a great dovetail to last month's episode in which we presented from the Playhouse to the Paramount. We looked at some of the early history of the Paramount, particularly the years of its first manager, Tom Boyle. We had some great footage of the demolition and reconstruction of the theater. And at the end of that episode, we promised that we would be back here for this episode. And my guest today is Eric Mallette, who is the current director of the Paramount Theatre. He has had almost a lifelong affiliation since this theater has reopened. He is the current director of this theater, and I do have to put in a little plug here. He was my student at Otter Valley High School just about 20 years ago, and I can tell you that theater is in his blood. So here we are in the lobby of this wonderful space. And as we look around and we have some idea from when we filmed the footage last time just how far this building had sunk, what it looks like now, it's a wonderful way to remember the late Joe Giancola and everything that he did to bring this building back. But for me, what's absolutely eerie here is to be virtually alone in this space because, of course, coming in, it's thronged with people, and then, you know, chat with your friends on the way out, and you talk about all the wonderful performances that have been held here, great memories for everyone. So what does this lobby mean to you, and how was it different in the original configuration of the theater?
Well, I think your point's really well taken, this idea that this is where the fun begins. When you walk in, you know, you have friends here, you're meeting family. For whatever is behind these doors, this is where it all begins, with these glowing lights and this glowing lobby space. You know, really the adventure begins as soon as you cross that threshold from Center Street into the auditorium. So I think this is a very special place as well, although you don't spend as much time in it as you do in the hall. You know, like a chef says, you eat with your eyes first, right? So same thing here. When the moment you walk in, this is when the magic really begins. I know in your first episode, you really talked about the history and looking back at the construction period back in '99 specifically. You know, as we look over here to our right, everything more or less 50 feet and more to our east was never necessarily designed to be part of the Paramount. That's an entirely separate building. So I make mention of that just to say, the theater today seats 838 people. At its opening, back in the early part of the 20th century, it sat a lot more. It sat closer to 1,000 people. I think it's absolutely incredible that we set 200 more people with less lobby space.
So how did we do that? Was the balcony steeper?
No, I think we were narrower. If you go into the balcony actually and sit in some of those seats, which date back to much closer to the original opening, you will find them to be much closer together, and you will find the armrests to also be much closer together. Also, there's a different configuration, and when we go inside later, we should take a look. You can see some history right in the wood floor. You'll see where some runners used to be, which actually you'll realize spelled a whole different shape for the seating configuration. It's not, currently it's more of an hourglass figure in the middle, if you can picture that, which is pretty typical theater. In 1914, there were straight rows. So we'll talk about that when we go inside.
Speaking of 1914, it's a well-published picture of opening performance in 1914. I think the first performance was the Chocolate Soldier, and we talked about that. But one of the things that is slightly different is the degree to which people dressed up to go to the
that
theater.
picture is always
and even,
striking.
you know, you and I right now, you know, we're tireless. We're going kind of
Right.
more with an informal look. Do people, in your experience, still get dialed up to come to the theater?
Yeah, you know, I think people do. It depends on the performance, of course, but we pride ourselves on being a theater for everybody, and that means up and down. So if you want to wear a top hat, maybe take it off when you get in your seat. But yeah, go ahead and wear a top hat. And if you're more comfortable in a pair of chinos and a nice button down, fine. And if it's jeans and a flannel, that's fine too. We're not, certainly we're not specific, and we leave it up to the individual. Like I said, the magic starts when you cross in here. So whatever that magic means to you is probably how you're going to dress.
What are some of, you have a long list here. I have some really heartwarming, wonderful memories here of performances that I've attended with family and friends. And of course, over 20 years, sometimes people are no longer with us, but you have the memory of what we enjoyed here. What are some of your favorite, or maybe nerve-wracking gigs that you have booked?
Yeah, it's also relative. There's the stress of what goes on behind the curtain, which is what it's our job to manage. And then there's the fun that goes on in front of the curtain. I think something that makes the Paramount really tick is that every night, we try to, as a staff, as a team, treat every night as opening night. And that sounds kind of cliche and kitschy, but it's true. That's what keeps that energy moving forward. So there's no real big standouts, I suppose, other than, there's always going to be gaffes and goof-ups and, things don't go entirely correct. But I think we can say that for the most part, the audience doesn't necessarily always feel that because it is so carefully managed backstage. But I think for us, really, to keep that energy moving forward and for every audience to be treated special, as they should be, every night's opening night for us. So there's been some things over the years, we'll go downstairs a little bit later and we'll visit the green room. There was an incident where somebody years ago did trigger a fire alarm, and that was during a smoke alarm, and that was during an entirely sold out show. So you can imagine we have 50 people working backstage, including the band and their crew, and then 838 people in the auditorium, plus the usher corps. That's another probably 30 people, give or take. So you're at 1,000 people that have to vacate the building really quickly. So that one always sticks in my head as, oh boy, this is challenging. But everybody got out safely. We determined what the issue was immediately, and people came back in and enjoyed the show.
As a theater manager, how difficult was COVID for you, and the fact that we had months and months with no live performances here?
Yeah.
I know the first time that I came to a performance, and of course everyone is wearing masks, presented. It was really just very emotional. Whew, at last,
here we are.
Do this again. Was that a particular challenge for you?
Yeah, we're a creative group here. We thrive on the energy of others. It's why we do what we do. And going through those months of a dark stage, 551 days, not that I was counting.
Wow.
It was 551 days from the closing on March 13th until our reopening in the following September. So that's a long stretch to go without an audience in here. And yeah, it was mentally exhausting. But we've always said the Paramount exists because of Rutland. We stand here today because of Rutland. I mean, the support that poured into this building, heartwarming is such an understatement. I don't want to use that term. I remember I was sharing this with the board of directors actually just a couple weeks ago. I said, looking back at that time when we were closed and we weren't inviting people into our home, I would go to the grocery store and people would recognize, oh, that's the guy that works at the Paramount. Do you know that in all the times that people approached me, nobody said if the Paramount will reopen. Everybody said, when will the Paramount reopen? There was never a shred of doubt that we wouldn't open. And the truth of that is because we mean too much to the community. And the community poured themselves into this building. Frankly, with financial support. We couldn't do it the old-fashioned way. The box office wasn't generating revenue.
Right.
So it was rebuilt in '99 because of the community, and it stayed alive in 2020 because of the community.
Yeah, and what you know full well as a performer, it's one thing when you are in front of a computer screen or you're doing something by Zoom or you pre-record something, but anyone who is performing, anyone who is lecturing, you need that give and take from a live audience, and that is what sustains you. I've done a couple Zoom things to an empty room.
Yeah.
And in one of them, I said to the organization, the next time I do this, I need at least 2 people out there to nod or give me a quizzical look.
Let me know that I can be heard.
So I think with all of this, it gives all of us a renewed appreciation for all the dynamics of live performances and live theater.
And it's that side of the curtain as well as this side. It's shared experience. That's what I enjoy about going to a live event, is I can see other people reacting and having fun in it. That feeds me as an audience member, that shared experience. That's why theater feels so differently than sitting at home and watching television. And that's not in any way to take away from television. It's just, it's an entirely different way to consume entertainment. You're not having that shared experience that you have here. And I think what's really great about theaters, especially this one, is you're sharing an experience perhaps with 800 strangers. And there's something really special about that. I feel that the most on nights that we present comedy. And it's so interesting to me to watch how different groups react to different jokes. And I can only assume that the performer feels that as well. Because sometimes there's some jokes that really work well with this part of the audience, and then some jokes really work well with this part of the audience. And when we circle back to that same type of joke, you feel that laughter get recycled over here. All that to say, you don't get that at home.
Right.
You're sitting at home watching it with your spouse or maybe by yourself, or with your dog that's not going to really respond much. It's not that same, to use your term, give and take.
Right. And I think with the tremendous variety of performances that are held here, you have different interactions with different audiences. So, for example, the Met Live, or the Met Delayed by a Day opera broadcast, that's one group of people. And then you have people of a certain generation with groups here. I remember the Kingston Trio concert about 20 years ago. And then another example of that is when Lydia Bastianich was here. Loved her cooking show, but that really was something that resonated with Rutland's Italian community, and the fact that she, as a well-known television celebrity, people would say, "How's your mother? You know, how are your grandchildren?" That was just wonderful to see that segment of the population. So from this point, you are going to take us backstage. You know, I've never been up on the stage or back on the stage. So that will be a treat to me, and we will also see the green room, of which I know nothing about.
Well, you will shortly.
Okay, great. As you can see, we are now standing on the stage of the Paramount, and you missed my wow, never having been back here before. And, you know, looking up and looking at all the complexity and the lights and all the things that must happen, this is really the feeling I get when I go into a great public space like a Gothic cathedral, and all of a sudden when you're inside you see all of this. And I think that the line of demarcation that we see between stage and audience is really part of the story of theater that people don't fully appreciate unless, like you've been on both sides. And I guess I never realized just the depth of this, because a lot of times, depending on what the performance is, you're never going to see all of this.
Yeah, a live performance, from the audience perspective, it's sort of like an iceberg. The audience sees, let's use a musical performance, for example. It sees the drum kit and a couple of risers and a couple keyboards and some microphones. And that's really exclusive to this space right out here in front of us that the audience can see. But then there's all that support structure that has to be, that's the underside of the iceberg. There's all that support structure that has to be backstage in the wings, as we say. So there's a lot of space back here. I mean, the stage is almost 4,000 square feet in total. So, but what the audience sees is probably less than half of that.
The other thing that strikes me is that in the evolution of this theater from the Playhouse, when in the early days you had vaudeville performances, essentially they would come and they would have maybe a few pieces of orchestra, or with silent films, which really weren't silent, you'd have a piano here, and there was probably a good piano in those silent years. But I think the part that has probably changed the most is what we see back here with the electronics, the sound, the lighting, because of course with the complexity of venues today, this is what needs to happen
That's
here.
right.
So how much of your world is here rather than worrying about the audience?
We have a great production team that really head up everything that's on this side of the curtain. I know just enough to get me in trouble, but we have some of the best in the industry right here making all of this tick. Everything you see does something. I think that's what's so incredible about a space like this. It is beautiful to look at, but add to that the fact that all of these pieces come together to create the magic that the audience gets to enjoy. That to me is a show in and of itself. I think people would just be enamored with the idea of coming back here and not so much watching the performance from here, but watching the performance of all of the logistics that have to come together. That to me is incredible. This loading dock right here, we've had 3 and 4 tractor trailers backed up to this, loading in massive Broadway shows. Now, we've had to excuse ourselves from that world a little bit because the logistics of the finances were becoming a little bit tough with 800 seats. But all that to say, it's 4,000 square feet, but 4 tractor trailers unload a lot of stuff. There have been times where I have walked backstage where I have turned right back around, walked right back to my office because we're talking stuff 20 and 30 feet high, just safely stacked back here, all in support of what the audience sees out here, which what the audience sees is a lot different from this jumbled, what I would call a mess, though I know it's not a mess, of wires and cables and boxes.
You know what this reminds me of, and something that I've experienced here in the Met Opera broadcasts, something that is part of their new marketing is the backstage with the performers. And rather than just the deadness of a long intermission, you go backstage with the performers. And again, you know, I've been to the Met several times, but of course I don't get to go backstage. And I'm wondering, has it ever happened, or could it happen, that if you have performers here, if there could be a little interview backstage or between acts?
That's interesting. Yeah, I think that would be something that the audience, again, would appreciate because that's the piece of theater you don't get to see. Yeah, the Met does that very well.
Cool.
So the original footprint of the theater was such that this area right here is actually all new. This didn't exist. So if you were to go outside, the space that I'm standing on is actually suspended over a part of what was, or what is, the Center Street Marketplace. So kind of beneath me right now is this long sort of cave that runs parallel to the auditorium, but again is suspended in air over the park. So to your point earlier, the space has gone not only up, but it's gone out to the east, and through the magic of structural engineering, floating out here to the west.
Is that a catwalk up there?
Yeah.
So how do you get there? Not that I want to, but...
Come on, let's go. Right here. So you climb up this ladder, which opens out onto that catwalk. And on that catwalk, so this wall of ropes and pulleys that you see, this is what's called an arbor. And the arbor is what controls the in and the out, or the up and the down of all of the lights and curtains over our head. So the technician would climb up the ladder, would get out at the catwalk, and then from that level controls the height of everything that's overhead.
What I find interesting looking at this, so there you have, I assume, some of the original brickwork that were part of the support walls as it was built in 1913-14. And here you have functional cinder blocks.
Right.
So I have a sense that this here is all new construction.
So everything south of the proscenium, the proscenium being the gold frame the audience sees from their perspective, everything south of the proscenium is all new. That was all, I say new, it was built in 1999. So you're right, yeah, this is all, you know, commercial grade cinder block. But old meets new, to your point, right here with this brick. And if you look closely, you can actually see the shadow of what used to be a door.
Yep, yep.
That would have come out from the house right box. And if you were to turn this direction and look that way, you can see that its sibling door is on that western wall. And somebody would have been able to, in the event of an emergency, exit through this door. There would have been a little suspended catwalk there, take an immediate right, and then go down a fire escape. Now, because we have expanded lobby space and have added doors in the renovation in 1999, that was no longer needed, so it was filled in.
And looking out again at the theater itself, it's such elegant classicism when you think of tasteless renovations that have been done in theaters, and this royal red, which is at the Louvre.
Right.
And so they must have been inspired at some point from really European opera houses.
Yeah, so what you're looking at here is actually what it would have looked like in 1914, with the exception of, as we discussed out in the lobby, the shape of the center aisle. But the wall fabric, the covering on the walls, any of the stenciling, all of the gold leaf, all the plaster work, that is all redone to 1914 specs. So it's not garish, which is really, I think, incredible, because in a space like this, it is all too often, I think, distracting. And this space, I think, is the perfect level, and this is my personal aesthetic coming through, this space is the perfect level of celebrating beautiful architecture while not taking away from what's happening on stage. I've been to some theaters that have gaudy, in my opinion, gaudy decor, which I know is period and was not added later on, but I find myself leering at the gaudy decor perhaps more than I am watching what I came to watch, which was on stage.
Yeah.
So.
The projection booth up there, of course, something like that would not have been there in 1914, I don't think, way up in the balcony.
I wouldn't imagine so, no.
Not unless, the only thing, I'll have to look carefully at that opening picture from 1914 to see if there was any kind of dramatic lighting, because, the floodlights, and that would be interesting too. I don't know if there would have been not floodlights, but footlights. Do you think the original stage might have had footlights?
I think there were, and I think we actually have some.
Okay.
I think there's some stowed away upstairs. Speaking of lights, I'm going to do what I do. We have students come in for a daytime series that we produce called the Education is Paramount series. And I always ask the students when they're coming in, how do you think we change the light bulbs? And I have had some wild answers. Of course, these students are all 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, and they have really wild, really creative, really fun answers. I've heard, you have a big long stick that has a basket on the end and you twist them out, or maybe a trampoline or something and somebody springs up, or a big ladder and somebody holds it still. And do you know? Do you have a guess?
I believe that there is, that what we see here is not the roof, but there's probably a catwalk and they're done from above. Is that right?
That's right. It's a much less fun answer than what they say.
Yeah. Well, I only know that because of historic churches that have large naves like that, and that's how they're
from above.
Changed. Yeah.
So it goes back to this ladder here we were speaking of. Up to the catwalk, head north on the catwalk, go up another ladder, and at that point you can enter what is the attic of the auditorium. And you're absolutely right. Bend over, pick it up, unscrew it, put a new one in, pop it back down. Proud to say every light bulb out there is LED.
Cool.
So again, old meets new. Great new technology. More than half of our power is generated up on our stage roof. We have a solar field up on our stage, up on our stage house roof. So with this old meets new, we're able to sustainably go into the future and continue to grow our operations while not just spending a bunch of money on old technology.
And now I guess we'll go to the green room.
Green room, let's go.
Oh my.
A lot of space, isn't it?
Yeah.
So this is a place, an area of
So
respite.
this is the green room.
This is the green room. Don't say
Barely
it.
green.
There it is, every time.
Barely green.
There's green over here.
Okay. So why the green room?
So the suggestion that I have heard is that the color green
Yeah.
is a very common color to be found in, specifically in TV studios. The area of respite that maybe a guest on a talk show would be in prior to would be painted green. And that wasn't just tradition, it was the idea that green is a calming color, so you would feel more at ease when you step out in front of the camera. And then the term green room sort of just stuck. So, but we do have a little nod to green. There is some green here.
Because the White House has a green room, so this is the one place, the anticipation of what I thought what green room was going to look like. This is a little
What did you
bit
imagine?
something, I don't know, more like White House elegance green room. I didn't know what it was.
Interesting.
So,
No, this is not.
but I like all the clocks here, and with the Paramount dead center here.
Yeah, so what we did is we took the time zones, the Gaiety of Dublin,
Yeah.
the Paris Opera House, Sydney Opera House, and that's what the local time is. Just sort of a fun thing to do.
So is the purpose of this green room for staff to relax? Is this where performers
Yeah, so
relax?
it's a place for performers if they're not on their motor coach, which most performers, at least in the touring world, arrive on a very large bus, which parks out back. If they're not on their bus, it gives them a place to sort of stretch their legs. It's private. It's away from the audience.
right.
It's a place of respite. It's a place to take a breather, and again have a space of their
Yeah.
own.
By the way, I've got these as throw pillows at home.
Do you
So
have?
someone-
If any go missing, I'll know where they went now.
Yeah, that's funny. But it's strange to see a large screen TV in a theater, but I suppose that people, maybe do people ever watch their performances if their performances are filmed after the fact?
Yeah. So
or-
what this screen is actually for is, of course, it just has basic cable with, may I point out, PEG TV, but it also has the ability for live feeds. So we can place cameras in the auditorium. For instance, we're home to 3 area dance schools. They hold their dance recitals here. It's an opportunity for the students to collect in this space and watch their fellow students perform on stage without cluttering backstage in an unsafe manner. So that's a big TV.
Yes, it is. It is. It is. It's appropriate for theater.
Maybe that's
setting.
garish. We found it.
And in the original days of the Playhouse and the Paramount, was this pretty much configured this way, or was it a series of chopped up smaller rooms?
I'm not entirely sure, but based on what we're seeing on some of the walls, and we'll look at that in a minute, in the other rooms, you can see where dressing rooms is painted. I can only assume because the stage extended further to the south in the remodel in the late 90s, these spaces too probably grew with them. That would be my assumption.
And since this is being touted as a historically speaking show, with your knowledge of the building structure, I think that we want to end with your revelations and discoveries about beneath the stage. So I think that's where we will have our
belly button.
Yep. So that way we can also market this for architectural shows, architectural revolutions.
I'm not certain the term belly button is in any architect manual, but
Well,
let's go take a
You're
look.
going to give your audience a sense of the anticipation of what a belly button is in a theater. So let's
All right,
go.
let's go. Why those doors are that colors too. It's plum mascara, and I believe it was, I'm going to say Sarah Bernhardt's favorite color, that pink.
I'm not
The
seeing-
pink on the door to the shower.
Oh, okay, yep.
There's
yep.
a reason they're that color, and I
Yep.
forget what it is. We could make it up though if you'd like. Let me move this now so that on camera people don't see that I haven't been to the gym in 36 years. Consequently, I'm 36. All right. Let's just move it out of the way. Maybe it's just ugly all the way around. Well, I guess it'll stay.
Well, no, I think
That's
that,
good, yeah.
the fact that you're part of the reveal here,
Yes.
even though I don't like that as a noun, you can do the reveal.
I'll do the reveal.
Of the inner workings of the theater.
So we were upstairs in the auditorium. We were looking at that beautiful frame called the proscenium that outlines the stage. It's what the audience sees, that beautiful gold frame. Now, if you think about engineering, and I don't know squat about structural engineering, but I can assume that when you cut a big hole in a wall, which is what the opening to the stage would be, is a big hole in what would have been a continuation of a wall, the structural integrity of everything would be jeopardized. Think of in your house, you have studs every so often to create that structural integrity. Well, in the theater landscape, you don't have that because there's a gigantic hole to allow the audience to look onto the stage. So having said all of that, to create a support system for that proscenium and for everything that lives above it, which in our case is, a couple of more stories, these large columns were put in place to create extra rigidity. Is that a word?
Yes.
Extra. I took a vocabulary class with you, I think it was.
You did.
Yeah, rigidity. I don't think I did well in that class.
He did. He got an A.
Oh, I did?
I believe you did.
You think I'd remember that? I didn't get many. So this right here creates additional support, given the fact that we know that from here over is just a giant open cavernous space, a big hole in the wall. What's very interesting, and I actually learned this myself not long ago, we measured from the inside of the proscenium, again, that gold frame around the stage, we measured, knowing the width is 32 feet, center would then be 16. I did not get an A in math, but I got that right. Measured out from the inside of the proscenium, coming in 16 feet, and I was pulling the tape, and I went, whoa, look at, hey, what are the chances of this? And this right here marks exactly 16 feet from the inside of the frame, the inside of the proscenium. So right now, I am standing dead center on the stage, and if I was one floor up, I'd be looking out of that beautiful auditorium. So I have done this, the Paramount's belly button. That's all I've got.
No plaque necessary.
No.
And since we're just about out of time at this point, I want to thank you for such a delightful
This was
tour
fun.
of this. It was a lot of fun, and look forward to perhaps a future collaboration.
That'd be great.
So
Looking
thank
forward
you.
to it. Thanks
you.
for the time.
You're welcome.